How's everyone today? Hopefully, each of you are doing well and welcome. Welcome. Today, we're going to be doing jelly art printing, and this is just a fun activity. And the question always comes up for me is why? Why would you do that when we have so many beautiful fabrics available to us? And it's a great question. And I'm going to wait just a minute until I see a few people pop into the chat box to make sure that I don't start before um, folks get here. Kyla, good morning. Our southern neighbor. So, jelly arts, if there is in the quilt show store a kit that you can get, if this is something after today you decide you want to give it a try and have some fun playing with it. And so I do want to go back to the question of why would someone want to do jelly arts on fabric? And the answer for me, there's probably many more reasons. And one is that I can create a fabric that is unique to me, that no one else will have. And especially if I want to do a quilt specifically for someone, that I can control how it's going to come out to an effect, to a degree I can control it in terms of color and that. But it's all an experiment and it's just a ton of fun. And the other thing that's really wonderful about it is that for art quilting, I can get some effects with the paint and the jelly art plate that I cannot get anywhere else. And I see quite a few people are now popping in, and as we're talking about this, if you have tried the jelly plate, working with paints on fabric and used it, please pop in and tell us what you've done. Tell us how you've used it. And if you have, some examples or things, put them in the forum, send them to me and I'll pop them up there, to my email. And so anyway, this is just going to be a fun day, and I think we need to start with what are the tools that we need. And before I drop the camera down to my table, I want to say to you that I'm once again, about a year ago, I was doing the same thing, moving. This one is a more permanent home. And so our garage is a nightmare. It is filled with boxes and we're trying to find it. So I have many things that I have used for it today, but today it was called scrounging for what I found. And you're going to have exactly what you need if you choose to buy the kit. And I believe Kristen's already put up there some links for the shop and for this kit that they have made up. And so let's go to the table and check it out. All right, you are going to get a 5x7 jelly plate. This is a really good size for making squares that are 4x6. If you're going to use a lot of different squares, you can cut them to 6x6, 4 inch, 5 inch, all of that as after you've made them. If you want the squares or the 5x7s, and we'll talk about that. You're also going to get 3 marking tools that are nice and flexible and soft so that they will not harm your jelly plate. One of the things is there are tons of things that you can use as a marking tool on your jelly plate, and as the morning goes, I'm going to try to, as I think of them, share some of those with you. So if you have a piece of paper or a notebook or something where you take notes, you might have it handy because we'll go through quite a few different things as I'm working this morning. So you're going to get these 3 tools, and each side has a different let's see if you can see a little bit better over here. Each side is open differently, so you're going to get, you know, there's quite a few things. You've got 9 choices here. As you're going through your house, anything that makes a mark, plastic, knife, fork, uh, comb. There's tons of things. Then you're going to get a blade, and this will help us when we're marking. You're going to see me using it, or you can, if you have a Baron. I often, before I got this in the kit and had this for today, I had a little antique iron, very small, but it's really heavy, and I've always used it either as a doorstop or just decoration, and I use that as my Baron. So if you have something like that, something that smooths, it's going to smooth out the fabric. And then you got a yard, I believe, of white fabric. And so I cut mine into 5.5 by 7.5 rectangles, simply so that I would get as many out of that as I could. So when you open this, you're going to find some directions in here, and they're going to tell you a little bit, and some pictures on the back of how you might use that. Use your tools and use your jelly plate, and give you some information. So hang on to that, you'll want it. And then you're going to have your jelly plate, and I'm going to move this aside because I don't need that there. And I don't know if I can show you this, but on either side there is a transparent plate. I leave the bottom one there. It just stabilizes everything for me. And I remove the top one, but please don't throw this away, because when you are done with your jelly plate playing for the day, make sure that you clean your jelly plate off as much as you want to. Place this over the top, and when you store it, please put it back into the plastic container that it came in, and it will last you a very long time to take care of your jelly plate. All right, so I have my jelly plate, and now what paints to use. I went and I got some tulip paints from Joann's, which are used for tie-dye, things like that. It is made for fabric, so, and it keeps it's called soft matte paint. It's what they had here, and the fabric has its feel. It does not feel like it has paint in it. It feels more like a dyed fabric with actual fabric paint. So that is a good choice. And with fabric paint, you really do not have to use a fabric medium. But there are plenty of other paints that you can use. I didn't find these until late last night, so I did not try them on here. It's a liquid dye from Dynaflow, Jacquard, and I'm going to try it today because I think it might be interesting. And so this is made for fabric, but it's for fabric dyeing, or dyeing lace, different things that you might want to do. So we're going to try that today with me. And then just regular acrylic paint. I have some tubes of acrylic paint here. I have my 3 primary colors. This is where that whole color theory comes into play, because I'm going to show you some examples that didn't turn out so well. From past, when I've done this, I found a couple of samples, and then the ones that I made and did not have good contrast and good mixture of paints. So the color theory, comes to play really well. So this is Liquitex. If I'm using acrylic, I am absolutely going to use a fabric medium. The fabric medium helps the paint to stay soft and pliable longer, because acrylic paint dries very, very quickly, and you would have to work very fast to to get your pulls from the fabric before they dry. But the fabric medium gives them a little bit more time, and it also makes acrylic paint on fabric permanent. So, Liquitex and Golden are my favorites to use in that. Then I also found I have some Royal Langnickel acrylics and little tubes, and these work really well too. Actually, there's some colors in here that have already been mixed. I have a few more that I don't necessarily have to mix them on the plate. And then any of the folk art or these types of paints that you can find, they're all acrylic. And anytime you are using acrylic paint, you need to add the fabric medium to it. And then the other thing that you're going to need is your brayer. And if you will give me a second, because it doesn't seem to be laying right here, and it's because I think I washed it, and I'll be right back. My apologies for that. So you have a brayer, and pretty much any brayer will work. This is a very wobbly one, and I just went out and purchased it because I couldn't find mine, and it has a flaw in it. So every time that I use this brayer, that flaw shows up. So I'm going to be working a little bit off the side so I don't get that in there. So a good brayer is well worth it. And then stencils, anything that makes a mark. This goes with Legos, and my son had millions of them, so I snagged one, and I will be using it on both sides for the pattern that's in here that you can get from Stencils, whatever. Then also you got in your packaging, in your kit, you will get it all wrapped up in bubble print, or this bubble paper. Perfect. Perfect, perfect, perfect. And if you get packages from Amazon, they have bigger bubbles. And so you'll get nice big ones, and some of the Amazon they're almost oval, so that works really well. And we are working very hard at unpacking and getting our dishes in our cupboard, and so this is another thing. Anything that makes a mark. This is cabinet liner, and it makes a fun little mark on your paper. Then, so let's get started, because that's the fun part. Oh, this little tool. I found it in my bag, and I think I got it at the dollar store. It's some kind of piece to a toy. But what I like about it is that the grooves in there make a wonderful textural pattern. But if you pull them apart, or one or two, you can create different patterns with this little thing. And if you keep pulling them apart and count the numbers in between, you get a kind of a cool thing going there, and it just pushes back together, so you can create as many patterns as you would want to from it. So anything that you can find that is soft, that will not damage your jelly plate, works really well. So I want to show you a couple of examples that I did. This one, I'm using leaves from outside off the tree, and I personally like to lay a layer of paint down and build on it, because I think the more layers that you do with the different textures and things that you have, the more depth that it has and the prettier that it gets over time. You can see my bubble wrap there. You can see the tool that I used there. So you can see some of the texture and some little polka dots back there that I used with a stamp. So that was one. This one does not have as good a contrast. Um, and so again, I want to emphasize contrast is very important. And it takes a minute or two with the paint and layering to get the idea of that. Here is a very good example of what not to do also um, with the leaves, because the only contrast that I really have is between the first layer and the second layer. The top layers were not bright enough, and so I didn't get good contrast. And this one was probably the worst in terms of contrast and what I did and didn't do correctly on that. And then I had these. It's liquid acrylic, and kind of interesting stuff because I put it on the plate, brayered it. But what I got, and I'm anxious to use it as texture because it bubbled up, and when I used it on the plate, it it gave me this with a lot of white on the background, which I really like, and using that as a textured layer I think will be a lot of fun. And then this one I cut out a little flower just to show you today. You could draw it on there, cut it out, and use that as a stencil. Or if you have stencils, I couldn't find mine. Um, and I did this on paper, actually packing paper, and I got this wonderful pieces of paper that I think that I'll use in some of my artwork later on. So this is again a background layer, a textured layer, and then the stenciled layer on the top. And so you can get your own looks with that. So let's get started, and we'll put down a first layer and get to brayering that. But first I want to see if there's any questions or thoughts here, because I've been talking an awful lot. Be sure to look at Kristen's notes, where you can get things and find the forum. Never done this before. Great. It's really a lot of fun. What is a baron? A baron is a tool that is used to smooth the fabrics or the papers out. It's just a heavy round, usually it's round, and it has a handle on it that you can use. It's going to work the same way as this is going to do. How to clean the jelly plate. Yes, the best way to clean the jelly plate when you're done for the day, and believe it or not, is hand sanitizer. Works great on there, or a baby wipe. I generally have a bunch of baby wipes here that I use, and when I want to really clean it and get around the edges of it and everything, I use hand sanitizer. I think it's the alcohol in it. Oh, somebody said this looks like the breathing thing that you get from the hospital. That's kind of true. It does. So that's another thing if you have one around. All right. So I think that was the questions. So I am going to start with let's start with a blue background. I'm going to drop a little bit of acrylic paint. I don't have my fabric medium with me, so mine will not have that in. I'm going to drop a little bit of black in there. Oops, and that was way too much black. So I am going to that came out far faster than I wanted. So I am actually going to waste some paint here, Because if I put all that black in there, I basically would have a black piece. So I'm gonna get rid of that. And that'll give me a nice deep blue. Let me put a little bit of violet too, just to counteract some of that black. All right, so you just take your brayer, kind of mix it around. And the one thing, the difference between paper and fabric is you need to put a little bit more paint than you would with paper. Paper, it can be very thin with the paint. And this is where that Baron, that tool, comes in handy. But this works really great because I really want that. And you can see that I put that fabric down there. Your hands work really well too, pressing it in so that you get a nice pull from that. And I checked on it, and with fabric paint and some of the soaking it up into the fabric, you need to let it sit a little bit longer than you do with paper. Paper, as soon as you put it down, you can pull it right up. And it didn't have enough paint, but I think that's going to work really well anyway. So I'm going to find a place to lay them for the moment because I want to make a few backgrounds. And let's go with mainly a purple background. And you always want to, if you have a liquid paint, to, and first you have to be able to open it. I would probably wear gloves. And let's see if I can use that black again. And I just want barely enough to darken that up a little. And roll that out and get it nice. And I've got a piece of paper over here on the side that I am cleaning my brayer off each time in between my pulls. And this again will help by using you know, something soft like this that you'll get in the kit. This is a wonderful little tool to really pick that up. And you notice that I did not clean my plate between each time. That just adds another layer of texture for me and looks great. It's personal preference. It would take me forever to do all of this. And again, I'm not using enough paint, as you can see, but I'm not going to worry about that because I'm going to get a different flavor today. And that dries pretty quickly. And now I want to do some teal. And so I'm going to use a couple of different greens. I'm going to actually use a teal. And let's go with this green. Get a little bit darker. All right. And let's see what adding this to it does. And I don't always clean my brayer off between each one because I think that I get, you know, some good texture. Okay, I've got a little bit more paint on it this time, and you can see where that flaw is making those lines across my plate. So I'm gonna try to, but you do want to wipe that off in between. And you do not have to do this first layer. This is a preference on my part. because I think the more layers, the more texture that you can get, you're going to get a richer end result, and it stays nice and pliable and soft, especially when you use the fabric paints. And this is a good sign that I've done better on a little thicker paint, because it's showing through on the back side. And you know, you could probably wear gloves, or those liquid gloves work really well. I just, you know, it's gonna wash off. And okay, I got a little bit darker this time on that, and I didn't mix my paint really well with my brayer, so where I had those spots of the teal, they came through, and I love that. That was wonderful. So now we're going to start. Let's go back to the blue, and we want to put a second layer, a textured layer on this. So I think I'm going to use a little, you know, this is where you start to play with your color theory and mixing your colors and seeing what happens. I think I want to mix a little bit of blue, and you don't want anything that's going to make a mark. And I'm going to use some gold. To give some shimmer to it. This paint has a little bit of shimmer. And let's go with some yellow. Mix that up a little bit. And I think on this one, I'm going to use, I had some little bit of clothesline wire and a leftover paper towel, and I wrapped some string around it, and I'm going to roll that this way, and I'm going to roll it this way, and let's see what happens to that. And this is all experiment. It really is. I don't know how it's going to come out, and that's why I find this to be so much fun, because I don't know how it's going to come out. All right, let's pull that. Let's see what happens, because I don't think, again, I had enough paint, but I got the texture that I was hoping for. So you can see that those lines are in there, and now my piece has some texture to it, which is great. And let's go with the purple one this time, that purple plate. So let's do some pink. Let's do some, how about some orange? I got, and I think I want just a tiny bit of white just to lighten that up. All right. Trying to get those lines out that is leaving. right, now we want to use some texture here. So why don't we just go ahead and use one of these and get some marks made. And then I'm going to go with my bubble wrap and add a few bubbles. And I'll press in the places that I really want the bubbles to show. And then let's take a pull and see what happens. And you want to be gentle when you first put the fabric down, because once it adheres, it's not going to smear anything. It's going to look good. And then flatten it out and let some of that paint come through. And that got a little bit muddy with the orange in there. So I'm going to take note of that. The pink didn't come through as much. And so, but that's okay because we got another layer to work with on that. And then I've got my green. So I think I'm going to take, let's go with a little bit of this. And let's go with some lime green. And some yellow. And I think I want a spot of white in there to make sure I keep it light. All right. Let's try this and see what happens. Getting some fun little lines going across there. So we'll see what that looks like. And let's try some of this. And let's pull a piece from this and see what happens. And again, I want to be very gentle as I press that down initially. All right, those dark greens, but you can see the texture in there. It looks a little bit brighter in reality than it did. So let's go back now and let's play with this first one. I've got some green on there. I'm not going to worry about it very much at all. But I'm going to work now with some, I've got some leaves here. I went out and pulled some leaves from my bush out front. And so let's go back to the pink. white. And just, how about a touch of gold? And then I'm going to use these as a stencil, and I'm going to put them on the back side because that's where the lines are coming up really nice. You know, the lines in the leaves, the veins. And I just might add just a little bit of dots here and there. Get that out of my way. Just add a little bit more and put this over it. And now this is the process I want to get the paint to adhere around those leaves. And I think I'm going to take my brayer and go over that a little bit because I really want those leaves to show. Push that out. Really get that in there with my hands. Pushing that down. These might have been a little poofy, so we'll see how it happens, what becomes of it. As I work my pushing that around, getting all of that. All right, let's see what happens. This is all an experiment. Doing it on camera is a little nerve-wracking, but there you go. And that's how you can get. And so right now, I can tell you that I need to work on my second layer with contrast, because contrast, again, is everything, just like it is with regular quilting. And that pink just wasn't the right pink. So I'm going to have to find, you know, a way to mix a pink that I get it brighter, or use more white, something in there, or actually more paint. So now we get this thing called a ghost print. So I'm going to gently take these off. And you can take a piece of fabric, another piece that you've worked with. Let's just try this one that I wasn't crazy about. And we're going to pull up that ghost print and see what that looks like on there. We might have mud, and that's what happens. And that's exactly what we got. We got nothing. So that did not work well on that one. So now you know. And so do I. All right. Then on this green one, I am really going to go with lots of yellow. I want a tiny bit of this green, just a touch. Just to add some sparkle. got a lump or something. After a while, you do need to clean off the brayer completely. I just, if I'm using acrylic paints with fabric medium, I just wash it off. If you let it dry, it'll peel off. And the rubber brayers actually are a little bit better, truly. And let's try a few of these. Get the veins. And so I was trying to use things that you would have around the house. You don't have to go buy anything. Got plenty of trees here, so I thought the leaves would be good. Get that pressed down because I do want to see those leaf veins. And you can do this in so many ways, using different things, different patterns, creating your own. Stencils work really well, and I wish I would have had a stencil that I could find. Also, this came out of my kitchen sink, and this is now going to be in the art room and make for a fun pattern as well. So, I mean, there's so many things that you can find and use. Much happier with that. So a little bit more white, a little bit more contrast in terms of that. And now we're going to get that ghost print. And we'll just do it directly on a new piece of fabric. And the longer you let the paint soak in, the better the pull is going to be, and you won't have as much paint left on your. And I already, as you're going to see very quickly, it dried quite a bit, but I kind of really like that grungy leaf look that happened by having all that extra paint. Now, with that extra paint, what I'm going to tell you is that you can do all these layers at the same time. Create your 2 layers, 3 layers, whatever you want, and let the paint completely dry between each layer, and you can do them all and do it in one pull. And when the last layer is completely dry, then you're going to take white, titanium white, or a white fabric paint, and you're going to bray it all over. And while that paint is still wet, you put your fabric on it, and you pull, and you will get all 3 layers at the same time, which is really quite fun, actually. So it's called playing, and that is pretty much, you can play and do just about anything with the tools that you have laying around your house. And again, the why for me, it's because it's such a relaxing thing just to sit here and play with different paints and find out what works and what doesn't. I will admit to the fact that on camera it's a little bit tougher because I'm trying to think about what I'm saying as well as doing this. So I didn't have the greatest pulse today. The last one, that was pretty good. But play with it. Find, your whole color theory. Use it. Don't, do the complementary colors as you layer. I like to work with my fabric with getting a base layer down first, but if you want more white to show, put one layer down, put your stencil on, put your leaves or whatever other objects you want to, or your texture, and pull it from that, and you don't have to have that third layer. But again, as you layer things, and if you have a really bad one that didn't turn out well, you can change that by getting that contrast back. And I'm going to take that ugly one, and I'm going to lighten up my paints when I find them in that stack of boxes, my other paints with the fabric medium, so that I have a little bit more time between there, because as you saw, that acrylic paint dries just so fast, and you need to work quickly to get the results that you really want from all of this. So, and with that being said, then the other thing that I want to share with you is I have over here to my right is where I was cleaning off the brayer. And let me take you down and let's see if we can see what I'm talking about. Here's where I was cleaning off the brayer. I don't want to make too much of a mess. And you can see that that's looking pretty good. If you were to take fabric and put it down there and use fabric and keep your colors, not piling them up too much to get mud. But if you're using yellows and whites and you're working with, greens and yellows, blues, whatever, and you get a nice layer of paint that you've just brushed off of that, take and lay it aside and start a new piece of fabric. And when you're done, put a adhesive on the back of it, and you can then cut out for applique. And I will tell you that I have had play days where I've had these wonderful, I've just cleaned off my brayer, and I've used, a double-sided fusible backing on the side over here with my fabric. I fused one side to my fabric, and then I've played with that, and then when I'm ready to applique, I use those pieces of cloth, and I get these wonderful, unique pieces that I can put into my applique and give that so much depth. And I would encourage you to think about doing that as well. So that's another idea and another thought. Before I close this, I'm glad that there's some of you think this is wonderful. The top of the red marking tools for Baron, you certainly could, but if you had the kit, you've got that other tool. At what point do you add the fabric medium? It goes right on the plate when you put the paint on before you roll it out. You drop it on there just like the paint, and it mixes in with the paint, and you're set and good to go. If the fabric medium is not being used, and I do it anyway, simply because it just makes me feel better. I wait 24 hours and then I heat set it, and then I wash everything. And I have not had much problem with bleeding or any of that. Credit card works well too. You got it. Did you pre-wash the fabric? I did not for today. Generally speaking, they say to pre-wash the fabric, and it's a good idea, so that there's nothing in it. I use prepared for dye fabric when I'm doing this, so that I don't have to wash it. That's the fabric that I normally use for this. How do you make the color permanent with acrylics if you do not use fabric medium? You let it sit for 24 to 48 hours. You heat set it with an iron, and then you wash it, and you should be good to go. Again, how do you mix in the fabric medium? You just drop it on the plate right along with your paint. Are you maybe over blending? Yeah, that could very well be. Because I was doing a lot, and the brayer was bugging me because it was giving me lines. Thank you, Susan, for that comment. The low contrast pieces are still beautiful and usable. Absolutely, because I would use those depending on what I'm creating in applique. And as long as I'm cleaning off my brayer or doing this on fabric, I can use a fusible and I can get some wonderful, wonderful things from that. Can you use the leaves you've taken off and put them on the darker pieces? Absolutely. Um, oh, thank you for that comment, Deb. Printed fabrics. Absolutely. Printed fabrics work well on doing this type of thing. You can use that as a background. Then I wouldn't put a layer of for example, I had this laying out, was planning on using it. It already has a background, so I don't need to necessarily put that first layer of color down because I want to see the pattern. And this pattern comes through, especially with stencils, and it's wonderful. So thank you for reminding me of that. I had forgotten that I had set that aside. Um, so is that glass you are applying paint to? No, it's a jelly print plate. And the jelly print plate works, the jelly plate works really well for gel printing. And so the jelly plate is soft and pliable, so you can, when you're pressing down, especially like when you have a stencil and stuff, you can really get in there and do that. Now, you can use glass, but glass is unforgiving, and you don't get quite the same results with that. So the gel plate is a great thing to use. All right. I'm really glad to hear that some of you are going to give this a try. And it's so versatile, and once you start playing and thinking about it, yeah, you got to do some test runs. It takes a little text type prints also, Deb, work great. And the background prints and things that you can use to over stencil or over dye or over paint. I've used some of my ice dyed fabrics to start with because I've already got texture. And then I will stencil using the gel plate. And I, just get some really fantastic fabrics. And then because I'm an appliquer, I can use a lot of this in my applique, and the fabric is still pliable. You don't feel any difference. And this is just kind of making me kind of excited with all that extra grunge around the outside for what I can do with that. So have fun with this and give it a try and see what you think. And of course, there's many many tutorials out there, but I wanted to give you something to think about and to ponder about that you can do to add to your either art quilts, art pieces, your applique, just having a lot of fun with. And I hope you do. And so have an absolutely wonderful week. And please, if you're on the quilt show, add to the forum your pictures. Tell us how it went for you. Um, give us an idea. And if you cannot get into the forum or post your pictures there, please send them to me and I will share them on the screen next time. And we'll see you, let's see, next week. Yes, we'll see you next week. And have a great one.